Very good morning and warm welcome to all of our delegates and our panelists on this glorious sunny day in South Africa and from wherever you are joining us by this virtual webinar. My name is Caesar Tonkin. I'm the moderator. I head up cybersecurity for Armata. We will be covering in this webinar the benefits from outsourcing your security operations. And as I said, it is an Armata webinar, and we'll be covering specific topics, which I will come through in a moment. But let me start by extending, an introduction to our panelists who've very kindly offered to assist us. Starting with Chris Woods. Chris is the founder and CEO of CyberQ Group, which is a global award-winning multinational cybersecurity company based in the UK, USA, and Philippines. And Chris and I have known each other for several years. He's world-renowned cybersecurity speaker and a respected voice representing the Midlands globally and nationally in respect of technology in cybersecurity in the UK, for example. Our other panelist is Bevan Lane, also someone I've known for many years. He's the CEO of the InfoSec Advisory Group, which focuses on consultancy and cybersecurity consulting, outsourcing services to clients across the globe. He's often on a plane between Cape Town and London. Very lucky man. He's customer-focused cybersecurity professional with over 23 years of experience consulting across a wide range of companies, from startups to global corporations. So it's a warm welcome to both Bevan and Chris. Thank you so much for making the time. We're looking forward to your contribution as our panelists. I am 21 years in the IT game, with IT track record, and of which the last 13 years has been in the cybersecurity world. I recently joined as running Armata Cybersecurity. I joined last November, and Armata is part of the Vivica Holdings Group. So the key theme is really about, if a company is considering outsourcing their cybersecurity, what are the key things that need to be considered? How do we go about doing that? And we certainly will be covering that. So the themes are: what's important when building a business case for outsourcing your security operations? What's the due diligence approach when transitioning your security operations? How do you achieve expected service outcomes from your cybersecurity services partner? And what's required to raise visibility on your cyber defenses in an outsourced services arrangement? I'm going to start by just doing my keynote presentation on that in the next 5 minutes. And then I'm going to hand over to our panelists, and I will be asking them specific questions around those themes. So in the Armata Managed Security Services, we offer customers a proactive and comprehensive approach to cybersecurity, helping them safeguard their digital assets, detect and respond to threats, and maintain a strong security posture in an increasingly complex and challenging cyber landscape. Our offering covers from cybersecurity consulting to managed security services to advanced cyber defense services. But underpinning all of that is we drive our value proposition around an outsourced arrangement on a bundled offering or a comprehensive or a selected offering. And that could be a SOC service, or it could be vulnerability management service, or an entire full outsource or a partial outsource. But we'll cover that. What is important is that taking any organization through the decision to outsource its security operations to a service provider, one has to adopt a systematic approach. And we're helping a particular customer right now that is in the services game think through what it will take to transition from the incumbent into the Armata outsourced security operations service. And we're taking them through an assess, a prioritize, a benefits, evaluate, transition, and operate phase. And in the assess, we look at what are the challenges and critical needs. What are they trying to resolve? What are they trying to protect at a business level? What is going right or wrong with the incumbent service provider? What are their critical needs? What are the priorities? And understanding what the priorities and how that shapes what the outsourced service arrangement should look like is really important. What are the benefits? And any CFO in any organization or business owner will always want to know, what's the rands and cents? What's the dollar amount? Are we going to be saving from this service arrangement? And that informs ultimately a financial model that shows the business case that the CFO or the business owner, the executive, can say, I'm agreeing to this. This makes good business sense, financial sense, and we see the benefits that we will realize by outsourcing the service arrangement. And I'm sure Bevan and Chris will be able to, through the panel discussion, give a lot more wisdom and guidance on that thinking. Evaluate, preparing, are we going to move towards an outsource arrangement, but retain some of our skills and roles and responsibilities in-house, or is it going to be a co-delivery model, or is it a full outsource? And what is that target operating model? Who's going to be responsible for what? And ultimately transitioning to at a contractual stage into the agreed service levels. What does a transition plan look like? And how does the service actually get operated from an SLA, performance management, dashboard and reporting, and ultimately executives would want to see a visualization, dashboard and reporting that they can track the benefit of the outsourced or co-delivered arrangement. And typically in a service operation, in an outsourced arrangement, it from a service operation point of view, it covers what is that service transition plan, what particular from a service delivery and a scope point of view should be insourced or retained in-house or outsourced, such as network defense, which is firewalls, SD-WAN, and most organizations are more than happy to outsource it. I don't know many organizations that build their own SD-WAN and MPLS network anymore. Endpoint protection, no, someone can do a better job than us building in our skills to administer the endpoint protection or endpoint detection response. Email security, maybe someone else can do a better job than us trying to retain skills in us. Privileged access management, same thing. Do we retain that, or is it better to give that to an outsourced partner? And that one is often retained in-house, but sometimes it's not. And vulnerability management, same thing, running vulnerability scans and driving and tracking the remediation, patching, etc. Those are often outsourced, but not necessarily always. Compliance management, some organizations prefer to run compliance management as part of its own ITGRC, a governance risk compliance function. And other times that could be an outsource arrangement. We were speaking to yesterday a customer, and they've asked us to give a proposal of running their compliance and assurance as a service. So some organizations are quite happy to also say, no, someone can drive that as the referee, an oversight partner. Threat management, security operations center, SOC service, offensive security, cyber incident response management, all go hand in hand, and typically some organizations prefer to retain it in-house, but many are starting to see that there is a business benefit to outsourcing that to a organization who's really skilled and got track record in this. And the service level management covers tickets, incident management, problem management, automated alerts and remediation, SLA performance management, and ultimately it's about stakeholder management, threat briefings for executives, visualization and dashboarding. So that's what the service operations looks like. And this, just to conclude, this is a typical, what goes into the managed security service, from service description to service management, service operations, service design, service transition, service initiation. It's a very much of an ITIL-based framework in moving from service design to service transition to service operations. And this is an illustration of what would go into that service transition plan, from due diligence to transition in the actual service to operating the service. And you can see an illustration of the sequencing. So that's a quick whistle stop that I wanted to just share with you as from a keynote perspective. I'm now going to stop sharing and then um, ask the panel to respond to specific questions. So panel, all good? You good? Thank you so much.
Very good. Yeah, cheers. Thanks for that, Caesar.
Okay, so the first theme is about building a business case for outsourcing your security operations. A question to Bevan, and once Bevan has responded, Chris would also weigh in and add to that. So Bevan, in your experience, please would you provide some critical reasons why companies typically outsource their security operations?
Yeah, we did a little discussion with you guys as we were prepping for this, and I think that the key point that comes up a lot is the skills, the resourcing at the moment in the market. And when when you're trying to do something like outsourcing, trying to develop a SOC from scratch, you generally have to do a heck of a lot of building in terms of resources and skills. And we have been approached by clients a lot in the UK specifically, where there's good case studies where the guys have actually employed people for security operational tasks or for governance tasks. And they're expecting someone to pitch up the first day, they're building a team, and then half their team, 2 or 3 members of their team, literally within that first month, either resign to say they've got another job offer, or arrive on site and then realize that this is a very long drive and they don't like this drive, it doesn't work for them. And they announce to their boss that the logistics, the hassle, all those things related to this is just such a big thing. And it's such a dynamic, changing environment that I think the first one that I would think of is exactly that. The resourcing and the type of involvement and effort that you're going to have to do, never mind the complexities involved in building a security operations center, and anything related to anywhere really in cybersecurity is quite complex. So the first thing I thought of immediately was that the cost angle, of course, is very tied to the resourcing angle, and that also has a very direct cost. The building something from zero base, even if you do have an existing SOC, the ongoing cost and complexity of the resourcing, those are probably 2 ones that I would start off with, that you need to immediately understand what that means, because you might think something and then 3 months later realize that whatever you were thinking in terms of resourcing and cost is actually completely different to what you were in terms of not outsourcing, as doing it in-house.
Okay, so you've covered both cost saving and risk management around critical resource shortages. Okay, Chris, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like that comment, Bevan, about people in the UK don't like to travel anymore. Looking for other jobs. I think that's the post-COVID era that we live in now, where people are working from home. And again, I'm in the UK today. Just to say this, again, thank you for inviting me to the panel. But it's absolutely beautiful today in the UK. I think it's around 32, 33 degrees. It's an absolutely amazing day. We don't get many days like that in the UK. Anyway, moving on, because that is a milestone for the UK for having a temperature like that. There's absolutely agreed, resource is absolutely critical, getting the right resource. The other thing, just to add to that, is any security operations center has to be 24/7. So it's kind of pointless doing a security operations center for 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day. If you haven't got 24/7 monitoring, then there's no point. So just to add to Bevan's kind of point around the resources and the cost, you have to cost it for 24/7. The other thing to add, and this is my humble opinion, or I can say professional opinion, having a security operations center for 1 or 2 or 3 customers really doesn't make business or financial sense unless you are critical national infrastructure, unless you are a big organization with some critical data, some critical assets. And the reason that is that you want to go to a SOC provider, because that SOC provider is looking after lots of customers. So when there's things like threat intelligence, when there's things like threat hunting, that kind of information gets shared across all the other security operations centers as well. And also, if you're imagining, dare I say, a little like a war, like a battle, you don't want SOCs just looking after 1 or 2 or 3 customers. What you want to look at is SOCs that are looking after 20 to 50 customers to 100, not too many, but have that breadth, have that organizational awareness, have that understanding of what's happening in the network. And I think the business case, when you kind of weigh up between doing it yourself, outsourcing it, there is a good business case, I think, for a hybrid model where potentially you have some team during the day doing a kind of 9 to 5, and then you have your hybrid model doing on the evening to support is really, really important. But also another business case, which I know probably going off the subject a little bit, but is also around that instant response, which the Security Operations Centre should provide, where if you do get breached and it's at 2 o'clock in the morning, you have the right professionals at the right time to help your organisation recover from that as well. It's not usually a good way to sell a Security Operations Centre, if I'm honest with you, that the instant response is really good, because the SOC should stop that. But ultimately, you know, having that in your kit bag, having that experience and having that 24/7, again, should make everyone sleep a lot better at night. So there's a couple of points to add, Caesar.
Okay, so thanks very much. So broadening what a company might want to outsource, not just SOC or cyber incident response, that they might want to, like I showed in my slides, they want to outsource the defense in depth layers, which is email security, firewall, vulnerability management. Maybe Bevan, you want to kick off and share in your experience, what are some of the pitfalls that need to be managed when a company is putting together a business case? A CFO, a CEO, a CIO is going to also, that's great, this looks good on paper, we see some savings. Tell me, what risk are we taking on? What are the things that you are not telling me? Pitfalls, okay.
Yeah, the pitfalls are not really understanding the reasons behind it and really what benefits, not understanding how your company can really get the most benefit out of it. And people sometimes start quite small and sometimes start very big. And when you start very big, where you're going to outsource everything, you probably don't understand what everything is. So the first pitfalls is understanding exactly what it is that you're trying to get out of the value out of this. Because you might be telling the CEO that we're gonna do this for half the price that we could do if we're gonna insource it, and then actually then you go and you try and do everything at one big go, and then the CEO looks at the cost and goes, you've misunderstood the cost completely. So getting the understanding of actually what you're trying to, what the value is and where the most value. Some of the other words we talk about, the focusing on the core skills that you need for, and then starting from there. And I think Chris had a really good example there, where some people actually do their own SOC and then realize that now we can do it, we can get 24/7 by doing it at night. Some other people go, well, let's rather focus on getting the firewall done and getting our antivirus done, but actually do our own SOC. So every scenario is slightly different. And the pitfalls are, if you don't understand what works best for your company, you're going to go down a road where the costs are going to get really high very quickly, and then you're going to undo exactly what you're trying to do here, and a lot of the values in terms of this.
No, I think that's right. You know, in any business case, one has to put together how you're going to be tracking benefits that get realized. And whilst outsourcing can be cost effective in some cases, it's important to evaluate the costs over time. And the CFO will be holding you to account, not only in the first couple of months, but forever, for the duration of the contractual term. He will be part of your steering committee and say, but we're not seeing the business benefits. When is it going to come through? And it's a tough conversation. So your thoughts on the benefits before we, I think we've covered the pitfalls quite well. Maybe just take it from a different angle. What do you see the 2 or 3 really key benefits there from your thoughts and guidance there, Chris?
Absolutely, Caesar. I was just going to say, just on the pitfalls, one thing that we've just come across, false positives. So when they outsource something, they have a lot of false positives. Therefore, the organisation needs to do a lot of work. And again, that's something just to be aware of. And you have to monitor that. Any good SOC provider will be monitoring false positives over the first 3 to 6 months, because when they outsource something, what we see is the work goes up, it doesn't go down. So the CFO is definitely going to ask, well, I thought my service was going to get a lot easier. But there's a kind of a storm. I mean, we see that time and time again. But just to add my experience there, the benefits really, Caesar, obviously, of having a 24/7 security operations center is obviously the visibility of what's happening in your network. So understanding around the enrichment, and again, you touch upon the point about having threat intelligence, vulnerability scanning, email, that may be combined or maybe kind of in-house. But again, that enrichment, working with cybersecurity professionals, provides great visibility within your environment as well. Also metrics. So I'm a big fan of metrics and doing metrics to the board as well. So again, how secure, the kind of fundamental question, how secure is my organization? And again, understanding the metrics, how many incidents, what type of incidents, and also measuring the kind of, especially the different types of incidents. We may see and hopefully not getting too technical, a DDoS service, dispute denial of service against a particular web server, but then we would see another attack coming a different angle. We're doing some lateral movement with inside the network. Having a security operations center and having the skills and the talent available to detect that really obviously gives your organization resilience that you need. Again, there's probably a second benefit there. And again, kind of the third benefit that I would probably talk about, as well as the enrichment, the better visibility, understanding what's happening in your network, is also I have to talk about the incident response. So if you work with any kind of security operations center, and if you do have a breach, it's not just the technical part that's really important. It's the PR and it's also the legal function. I have to talk from the UK here, not that I'm a South Africa. The laws may be different out of South Africa, but that's pivotally really, really important that organisations get that right. I think we both saw examples of good PR and bad PR when people have got attacked and how that's handled and how the communication. Working with a very experienced outsourced security operations center, again, is absolutely pivotal to help you through that journey, because in our industry, nothing's 100% secure. There's no such thing as 100%. There's no silver bullet. It's basically learning, understanding what the threat intelligence is, and then reacting to that. So again, that would be my 3 points, Caesar.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to get on to the next theme, and that's about due diligence approach when transitioning your security operations. The question to Bevan is, what steps should the customer and service provider mutually undertake in the due diligence exercise? And that is whether this is a partial outsource or a full outsource. A partial outsource could be SOC only, or a packaged outsource such as I want my firewall, endpoint protection, email security, and vulnerability management, just that bundle to be outsourced. What steps should the customer and the service provider that has been selected to take them through an outsource negotiation, what should they mutually undertake in a due diligence exercise? Thanks there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on the cost part. So the clear and detailed definition of services is very, very important to understand exactly what you're wanting out of it. And again, it's a clarification between you as a company trying to get the service and the service provider. That communication, which I think touched on a pitfall thing we didn't talk about necessarily enough. If you don't have effective communication from day zero, that's where the mistakes come up. So when you're doing due diligence, have that honest discussion with your providers, and understand their capability and what you're trying to get out of your services together with it. And there's a really word here, realism and achievable sort of targets, because I think sometimes we do expect maybe a little too much from a company when we're paying maybe a very small price. And sometimes they might exceed your expectations, but you need to have that discussion up front to understand. And we've got some case studies in South Africa where we brought in a very small service provider to do a SOC. And we were very impressed by how they were actually able to exceed what we expected from a small provider. And I think that really is a good example. These days, small providers can give you a lot, but then you don't get maybe certain aspects of what you'd get from a medium to large provider. So it's understanding your environment, your specific definition of services together with that. What is our actually realistic and attainable targets? And then on top of that, I think we're going to talk a little bit about that just now in terms of SLAs, is actually having something there in terms of penalties, incentives to make sure that you actually, if things do go wrong, how do you cover yourself? But I don't want to say all the things.
So I want to role play with you. If the customer says, look, we want you to take over our email security, which is Mimecast, what are the things in the due diligence that you would, maybe 3 or 4 questions you would ask to know what you're taking on? What's advice there? Your advice there?
I think very much it's about the experience in that specific type of thing. So not just, what have they done in terms of giving email services, and then saying, well, you know, in terms of your specific skills in Mimecast, for example, in that scenario, what is your experience with Mimecast? And the trick you'd want to see is the value that they could give you. Do they understand the metrics? Do they understand the additional services that you can get from something like Mimecast? It's very easy to do Mimecast at a superficial level, but you want to see the value that they're going to give you. So how much they understand the extra levels of Mimecast, what have they gone from previous experience? And then you'd get a really good feel by having that discussion and going, well, tell me about Mimecast. What is your experience on it? And then if the guys give you a very superficial, quick answers, you'd know there could be a problem here.
Yeah, so in that, what I'm hearing you saying is that your due diligence exercise will know what's going right, what's going wrong, what's correctly configured, policy configuration rules, versus, oh no, that hasn't been configured. And so you know what you're taking on, what license count you're taking on, whether that license is expired or if there's a renewal about to happen, and is, you know, what risks are you taking on. So it's very good to baseline as part of the due diligence, platform by platform, other than the overall security posture that you're taking on, which is kind of what you're saying. Anything else to add there, please, Chris? Just a Mimecast example or any other example, firewalls, endpoint protection.
Well, I think no, Bevan and CZ, I think you both covered it there. I think baselining, especially from a SOC provider, is absolutely fundamental. That, you know, what assets are you taking on? And there's always the devil's in the detail. Things like shadow IT. You know, there's technology that may not be set up correctly, that may not have gone through a configuration management system. And again, that's fundamental, because when you pass things across and they're not passed and they're not baselined correctly, we've seen a lot of incidents because of that. So again, just to kind of echo your call there, really, Caesar and Bevan, that kind of baselining, understanding all the assets is pretty much fundamental. The one thing I would add, once you have that baseline, any SOC provider then can look at, we touched upon it around enrichment. So again, if you have email security, if you have threat intelligence, if you have the firewalls, if you have the logs coming in, have MDR, you can then start around the enrichment to give you better visibility of what's happening in your network, and also the type of incidents that you're seeing, because quite George Orwell, some people are more equal than others. You know, some incidents are more equal than others. So if you have a lateral movement in your environment, that's very different to a ransomware. So again, these types of incidents can really help you understand and also get better in kind of breaking down the different incidents that could affect your organization as well. But again, that's based on good baseline.
One thing that you and I have been chatting about over a period of time, and that is, as part of a due diligence, if someone says, we've got a basic SOC service and we'd like you to give us a proposal to take this on. The one thing that you've mentioned to me on a number of occasions is starting it by doing a SOC maturity assessment. Do you want to just tap into that?
Absolutely, yeah. So just quickly on that, CZ, it's kind of SOC assessments and SOC maturity, because there's a lot of, unfortunately, in our industry, and I think you've seen this season and even people are offering security operations centers. Now, what actually is a security operations center, and how do you define what's good and what bad is? So if I've got two people looking at a firewall log, is that a security operations center? If I've got individuals looking, CZ, you talked about that in your keynote. As definition of the security operations center, again, fundamentally is the professionals, it's the 24/7 monitoring, it's the enrichment, it's the visibility, and it's the reaction. And again, these are absolutely fundamental. So we do, again, kind of SOC assessments and SOC maturity assessments, where we walk into an organization and we understand, well, what have you got today? And what's the blind spots? You know, what aren't you monitoring, and what happens? And more importantly, how do you report on that? Because going back to what we said previously, metrics are fundamental. If you can't measure it, then you can't understand if it's good or bad. And this is what you have to do in a security operations center: produce these metrics that give you something to build upon. Give you a few examples quickly, but even simplistic things like vulnerability management. You know, how many vulnerabilities did you have last month compared to this month? How quickly did you fix them? What type of security incidents did you have last month compared to this month? How many malwares did you have? What type of malwares? By having this granular detail gives the security operations center, and more importantly, the customer, the knowledge and the experience to go forward and to basically build out better plans and better understanding has to be driven by data.
Thanks very much. Okay, so you've now done your due diligence exercise, and the team has, been divided up. Your own team has been divided up by different work streams: the email security, email security, endpoint protection, firewall, and each of those leads in your team have done their homework on what the customer's environment looks like, from the licensing to what's working, not working, at the system administration of the actual platforms that you're taking on, and what is being correctly configured, what isn't correctly configured. You've done your baseline, and what do you do with that information? Do you just allow the team to give you informal feedback, or do you put it into a very structured due diligence report? And if so, what do you do with it? You want to kick off there, Bevan?
Is that for when you've taken over? I was thinking you're
Oh,
still doing the
no.
due diligence report now. You're
Yeah,
still
you
doing
still do
the
diligence.
soccer.
So
Yeah.
you've started a report. What's the call to action around that due diligence? Who are you going to share it with? What does it mean for your engagement with the customer? How does it shape your contractual negotiation?
Yeah, I think the value is actually giving them more than they're expecting. So when you're talking to the clients maybe has a fixed view of what they're going to get out of a SOC, and then showing the added value for what you found in terms of those gaps. So we found some gaps here in terms of the way you're managing your firewalls, where you actually you're missing components of it that are critical to making the management of the firewall far more effective. And maybe you're not looking at the reports well enough. You don't understand the feedback that we can give you extra. So it's the extra add-ons that you'd get from a SOC operator that don't cost extra, that are just standard things that maybe you're not doing. So it's understanding really the extra benefits. And I suppose by looking at across all those wide areas, you'd be able to show far how many of those are. So it's not just one little email. You could actually get the benefit from the firewall, from the email. And then I think Chris has spoken a lot about incident response. It's really incident response processes, and how through best practices and through people that are dealing with incidents across so many different environments, what value they can give you would be a large part of that.
What I like about what you're saying, and I'm putting words into your mouth if I may, and that is from your due diligence, you'll know what the gaps are. You'll know what is stable, what needs to be optimized, what needs to be transformed versus transition. Transformed equals a service request. It's an out of scope thing. We want you to transform you to ingest all of your firewall logs, your endpoint protection logs into a SIEM platform, and we're taking over your SOC. But those logs are not there already, so that's transformation. Transition is like for like, almost. But what I think is really key to what you're saying is that out of this due diligence, you're going to know where you really can add value. You will know, oh, you don't have integrated automated security reporting. Mr. Customer, the value added, we're going to give that to you at no additional price, or at a very small price point, because it is strategic to how we deliver quality service to you. Anything to add there, Chris?
No, I think just going back to the point you just made there, I think understanding, again, baselining, understanding the kind of value that the security operations center is going to bring. And that actually talks about the enrichment. So if we know we're getting on different technology and that we're building them into the security operations center, absolutely, Mr. Customer, we can provide you with better visibility, better reporting, and better monitoring as well. And as you talk, what we tend to do around transformational that you alluded to there, Caesar, is that when we see a product that is maybe not fit for purpose at this point in time, what we would do, I mean, there's absolutely a conversation there that says this product's not fit for purpose, but in the interim, what we do is that we would bring that on. So we would bring it in, obviously not talking about the contractual agreement and the advisory and etc., but we would bring that into our security operations center, still get the value or the enrichment out of it, but then look to do a transformational project around either that piece of technology or the people technology. And what we're seeing now with the cloud, and especially with some of the source solutions as well, is there's lots of opportunities and there's lots of ways you can do that, and not necessarily costing the client a great deal of money. And again, that's the value that the SOC provider will bring to the conversation, because they can look at the products that maybe not fit for purpose and obviously advise that customer on the best approach rather than buy new tech to do new tech stuff. You know, maybe that's not the best course of action, and that's what a SOC provider should be providing you.
What you've said, and I think it's really critical, again, I'm putting words in your mouth, is what can you standardize? What can you consolidate? As part of the transformational focus, you know, because maybe you've got a whole lot of security technologies that if you consolidate and standardize, you're going to get a cost benefit saving, and we will have a much more effective way in delivering that as a service, managed security services back to you. Maybe you've got 5 or 3 different firewall technologies, and if you consolidate them all onto, say, FortiGates, and ingest them all into the Forti Analyzer and Forti Manager, we're going to drive automation from you, and therefore your cost to manage a firewall, if you'd retained or upskilled your firewall engineering team versus an outsourced arrangement because we shared services across customers, oh wow, back to your business case conversation. So I get very excited about these topics because we realize how critical it is that we've got to make a difference to help customers, small to large, really get absolute maximum value, maximum threat protection at the lowest possible price point without compromising on quality. I keep saying quality is just as important from an ITIL point of view in the security world. So my next theme is about achieving expected service outcomes from your cybersecurity services partner. And it's a nuts and bolts question. What advice would you offer companies in setting service level expectations on the service outcomes from an outsourced arrangement? Do you want to kick off there, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple straight away. I mean, if you're talking to any SOC provider, I mean, references are absolutely key. You know, where have they done this before? Who have they done that? Which type of customers? Is it the same business as yourself? So is it financial? Is it manufacturing? So references is always a good way to start a conversation, especially if you're interested in that SOC provider. The second part is some of the reporting and obviously speaking to the SOC manager. So obviously having a look at the reporting which the SOC provider should share with you, having a conversation with the security operations center manager. You know, how does he run his security operations center? What levels are in the SOC? Do they have threat hunting as a service? How do they do testing, and how do they test the staff? Again, would be the second point that again would be really beneficial for someone looking for that SOC provider. And again, I think for the kind of third one is around that kind of technology. You know, what technology have they strong in? You know, what certifications have they got? How do they keep their security operations center motivated? The false positives, again, I touched upon this early. How does the security operations center manage the false positives when things aren't going well? How does that work with your customers today? I mean, that would be the third point, and that will give you a really good feel and a really good expectation about if this SOC provider is someone that you can work with. And also, it would demonstrate their capability. I would argue that if they don't allow you to speak to the SOC manager, they don't allow you to speak to references, and they were quite cagey about their false positives, then that would, for me, be a little bit of a red flag.
Thanks very much, Chris. From a service level and SLA, constructing the SLA, what goes into the SLA from a content point of view, your thoughts there, Bevan? Whether it's firewall, endpoint protection, SOC, vulnerability management, etc., doesn't matter.
So the SLA must be drawn up so that you can get quantifiable metrics out of it. And I think that the word comes in terms of actually, you know, I want to be able to get a specific goal out of this, and I want to make sure that we can show that we're scoring these guys maybe even better than what we've got previously in terms of what we presently have. But the letter must have the one thing that we do pick up a lot of times from people, they don't really understand targets very well. So the quantifiable metrics, the realistic and attainable sort of targets, what they're currently doing doesn't really give them great metrics. So the SLAs must be driven with that in mind for me. And it's something we do when we do audits and assessments of a company. We ask them how they're scoring themselves, how they're getting their metrics, what are their targets. And the SLAs for me should be very closely tied to that. And that's where the penalties do come if you don't make those targets. But if the targets are are very loose. They don't really give you value because they're just about simple things like uptime, but they don't actually talk specifically about security and where the value comes in. And that's why the quantification of metrics for me is where a very good SOC operator will give you that. I've got a metric which you haven't even thought about doing yet, but the SLAs should drive that conversation.
So, for example, if you take on an EDR platform, you would expect one of the metrics is that the agent from the EDR tooling has been rolled out to all endpoints and servers. That's an SLA. It can only be 100%. Or within reason, maybe 98% because of reality. Another one is that you have detected malicious processes, such as how Cobalt Strike is being used, and that's a legitimate red teaming tool, but it can be used by threat actors in a malicious way. Did you pick up Cobalt Strike everywhere, or only and timelessly, real time, or did you miss it? And actually, we were compromised by Cobalt Strike. That's when an SLA, in terms of EDR, endpoint detection response as a service, is either missed or achieved. And I think it's in my view, the SLA is subject matter focused, technology relevant, but more importantly, risk. It has risk context in the company's environment. And it's got to be something that the administrator of the EDR platform and all of the specialists who are running the EDR service can actually operate against in a standard operating procedure. It's no good you having a really fantastic theoretical SLA that is very difficult to execute. I mean, I'm kind of speaking aloud here. What's your thoughts on that?
Who's that to?
Chris, sorry,
yeah,
to either
Chris,
of you. You take it, Chris.
Especially, I mean, the SLAs usually have a financial punishment if they're not met. So with anything with a financial, you mentioned there about deploying, let's just say, malware software on a number of devices. Now, our security operations center, we look after IoT devices and OT devices that we feed in as well. You can't put malware on them. You can't put malware on an IoT. You can't put malware on a operational technology OT. However, from a very black and white, an SLA, it's like, well, you didn't hit 100%, and you didn't discuss that. And this is where sometimes the SLAs, absolutely important, have to be done in conjunction, because usually, especially if it's the first time that the client's had a SOC, there's a communication, there's an understanding of that, but then there's also the ramifications. So, obviously doing penetration testing with, hacking kettles, which is an IoT device that you haven't got, you can then hack something else, which then could damage and could breach your organization. So I think, going back to the point, them SLAs have to be clearly understood. They have to understand the nuances within an organization, especially now with cloud providers, supply chain management, and also OT and IoT, and it has to be work in conjunction. So that's something, a bit of word of warning. And when you put a financial consequence against anything, God love them, but you get a lot of lawyers and contractual people will really start to look at that in real great detail on both parties, when we've noticed that just a simple conversation that explains that simple example, that you can't put malware anywhere. So we can't get 100% of your environment. We're going to fail SLA on day one, but this is how we can work that differently for Windows operating systems. We'll ensure that this malware is installed, that just by a little bit of terminology, you can make a massive difference.
Thanks very much, Chris. Before I get on to our final theme, we have posted three poll questions, Slido questions. Do click on them and feel free to respond. And before we close, we'll just share the results. All right, our last topic is raising visibility on your cyber defenses in the outsourced arrangement. And it's not the technical audience that we're talking about here. It's the executive stakeholders. And that is, they would want to have a preferably visualization of what is happening in the outsource arrangement across all of what's in scope from the managed security services, other than SOC, not just SOC. And they would want to know, that you're going to give us this to them real time or in a very easy, digestible way. What's your thoughts and guidance on how in a managed security service, an outsource arrangement, one should go about doing that so those stakeholders give their buy-in and commitment because they see things which is they can relate to, relevant. Bevan?
Yeah, I think metrics was what we spoke about earlier, but metrics must be done in a way that can go tactical, operational, strategic. You can get 3 different levels. So if you're only giving the fact that you don't have EDR on all your devices to senior management, they're not going to see the value. They're going to go, well, that's great. So we are covered or we're not fully covered, but they want to see how the actual extra level above that, where you get what the continuous improvement, the metrics that give you something that shows you how effectiveness really. So you're looking beyond just simple operational, we're looking at effectiveness, but then taking that effectiveness and moving it into the regulatory type of reporting. And the governance and regulatory reporting for me is where I think a lot of SOC operators are not very good at. They don't give you that extra level. I want to know how this ties into our business goals and our legal regulatory goals. Have we had any regulatory breaches? How is that? Have we set up our structure so it actually ties into the regulatory breaches? And that's what the board want to see. So are we secure is a question that we're always going to ask you. Well, we can't really answer that question always 100%, can we? But we can give you something that gives you how much we've improved and how we're meeting our business goals and legal regulatory goals. And that means you've got to understand what the company does, what their risks are, what their goals are, and align your reporting to that. For me, this is something that a lot of guys don't do. They just do it a very superficial sort of, this is what we're doing. They give you canned sort of reporting. And what I'd want is my provider to actually align and to change the reporting to align to what we need and to be able to show how they get the value from it.
Thanks very much, Bevan. Chris, your thoughts?
I just agree with Bevan there. I think he's absolutely right that SOC providers provide a lot of technical reports and they don't link it back to business goals. We've still got a massive problem with cybersecurity in the boardroom. I think in Europe, in South Africa, and the US are trying to do something about that. One of the things for me, having kind of worked around the globe in cybersecurity, is that most board meetings, when you talk about financial, people can participate. So people can, how much sales have I done, how much profit, cash flow, etc. Everybody can have a conversation. Unfortunately, today, if you talk about cyber security, the board, go away a little bit and they don't feel confident enough to do that. Now that's our problem, and it's our problem because we're not giving them the right information to do that. Something that I was participating in is something called Secure Boardroom. And again, Secure Boardroom goes on to what Bevan was alluding to there, where it's actually metrics that everyone can participate. So again, how are my incidents this month? I mean, that's probably too level for a board, but how is my security score for my organization? And what difference did we make? What's the likelihood of us getting hacked? And I know as cybersecurity professionals, we can discuss the pros and cons and no silver bullets, but we have to have a metric. We have to have something that we can nail to the mass to say, this is how we're improving the organisation month by month by month, which exactly fits into what Bevan alluded to about budgetary. How much money does the security division need? And also, how does people feel involved that they can see the progress? And that's something, if I'm honest with you, Caesar, something as cybersecurity professionals globally, we haven't done a great job around that. But I think going forward, and it's great to hear, Bevan's just said, absolutely great to hear that we're not, most organisations aren't doing that, but they're getting there. So I can tell you what I'm seeing is that organisations in the UK and APAC and some of the US are asking that, because especially in the US at the moment with our US customers, that if they get breached, there's a prison term associated with that now. So if they haven't done the right thing or can be seen to be doing the right thing, then they could have a massive penalty as well as a prison sentence as well. and we have to involve the board in these conversations. Again, if secure boardroom is one, there's other metrics one can use, but again, it's a good way to involve that boardroom.
One of the things that I feel quite strongly about is automating the dashboard and reporting. So if you're managing a customer's firewalls, endpoint protection, email security, doing the vulnerability scanning, running the SOC, and maybe also running the EDR, all of that is data that can be aggregated into the likes of a Power BI. And if there's specific metrics based on, say, for example, the SANS top 20 critical security controls, you could select exactly what are the key metrics, what the thresholds are. You won't accept anything less than, at any stage, 95% of all endpoints have got the latest DAT and signature definitions from the antivirus. And so that's a threshold. So you cannot be less than 98%. And you would see in an automated Power BI report all of that at a drop of a hat. And that's quite tactical and operational type reporting. And then elevating it a few levels up to eventually, right, there's only 10 KPIs that the board is really interested in. Is my environment protected against ransomware? That could be it. And every year you would change those, because the nature of risk, the threat landscape changes, and maybe even what you're doing in business from a business model changes, that you now need to be measuring other things that are important, such as you're now going seriously digital e-commerce platform as a business, and therefore that becomes more critical, that we have to have our digital platforms available 100% 24/7, and therefore web application vulnerabilities is much more of a priority than it was last year. And I think that's the kind of thinking that needs to take place, and it is part of the due diligence exercise. What reporting are you getting? What are you not happy with? What are you expecting? So the due diligence is also an expectations setting exercise.
I think if I can just add to that, Caesar, I think the reporting that most SOCs do, it's most of it would be automated and SOAR platform on top of that. What I find from a secure boardroom perspective is that it's a multitude of different metrics. It's not one, it's not firewall logs, it's basically, the question is, how secure is my organization?
Yeah.
And it's how do you answer that? And you can't answer that, I don't think, with saying, well, we've got this technology. I think it's technology is part of it, but there's like a score that says actually, and you can use the CIS 18 top 18 to do that, and there is ways, but that risk score then people can discuss, and that metrics people can say, well, this makes this score, and on the back of that you can start to have a really good conversation. How it filters down and how you get the different metrics, like you alluded to earlier, Caesar, you've got a better malware product, or you've automated, or you've joined technologies together, that in turn gives you another score, but it answers that fundamental question, am I secure? Because that's really why do we exist? We exist to protect data and protect reputation. That's the reason cybersecurity organizations are here today. That's the why. How we do it, boom, boom, boom. And that's where we need to stay at the board, I feel, Caesar. We need to start giving them some simplistic metrics that really we understand, that they can then deliberate, debate, and understand, well, actually, I'm quite happy with my risk score. I don't want to spend any money this year.
Yeah.
Or actually, I do want to spend this money. And it's down to us as cybersecurity professionals. Again, I'm going to say secure boardroom because that's what I know, to help them present that information and to get them part of it. Because at the moment, I'm going to make a massive assumption here. When you talk about security in boardrooms, they think it's an IT problem. They think it's an IT issue. So, security is not an IT issue. It's not an IT problem. It's a business problem. And again, it's our job really to kind of levitate the language and really understand about cars. We can do it today with cars. So I know nothing about cars. I drive a Volvo. The safety is pretty good. I choose not to drive another car because that's my personal choice. But I can compare what a good car looks like and what a bad car looks like. Can we do that today in the cybersecurity world? There's a lot of VC money saying this product's better than that product. And one last statement I'll say, if you look at that lens, we're looking at what, 2023, we're seeing more attacks than we've ever seen before, probably this year. Yet Caesar, there's more technology than there's ever been before. So it's not like the seatbelt. When Volvo brought out the seatbelt, lives dropped. There's so much cybersecurity technology today. Is that
I love
helping?
your analogy.
Well, it's down to three things, and it's people, process, and technology. And it's no good spending the technology if you haven't. There's no point giving me a Formula One car, Caesar, and asking me to drive like Lewis Hamilton. It's not going to happen. What you need is the Formula One car, the Lewis Hamilton, and the phenomenal team that he's got around him to make sure that he can perform at his best, to make sure his vehicle can perform at his best. That's no different to what we do.
Okay, we need to close it. Oh, thanks, Chris. That was really fantastic insight. I'm going to now share the results from the 3 poll questions. So the first question is, are companies considering the business case for outsourcing our security operations based on one or more of these? That's security operations in part only, all of our security ops, or not considering outsourcing. So the majority of the 13 participants said security operations in part only. And the next question. The business benefits our company expects from outsourcing security operations includes one or more of these drivers: improved security and compliance posture, and cost savings, and adopting security or operating security practices based on leading security frameworks and standards, and cyber risk management relevant to lines of business priorities, and then raise service levels. So it's interesting, raise service levels didn't feature higher, I would have expected, but no surprise, improving the security and compliance posture. We want to do what we do to protect our company better. And that's a good driver. And the last question was, our company welcomes Meeting to explore our outsourced security needs. So yes, we certainly welcome meeting with you. And if you do have, and if you'd like to get in touch, it is sales@armata.co.za. We will definitely set up a time with you. And that's a good percentage you are interested in a discussion around a partial outsource arrangement. I'm going to stop sharing. And so in closing, thank you very much to Chris and Bevan. I really appreciate the excellent contribution, and the discussion has been very fruitful, and I'm sure the audience has really benefited from your years of experience. And I thank you once again for taking the time. And to the audience, thanks very much for being with us. This will be posted live in due course on the various social media platforms. And if you do have any questions, do reach out to us. Thank you once again, sales@armata.co.za. We welcome meeting with you and exploring how we can add value in the Armata outsourced and managed security services arrangement. Chris, Bevan, thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caesar. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.
Bye.